No one's perfect. Critics can be dedicated to their craft, but that doesn't mean that they always get it right. Neither do players. Sometimes everyone overpraises games that don't deserve it or find flaws in absolute masterpieces. Whatever the case may be, everyone has an opinion. Before we dive in, please give us a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with our videos. Without further ado, here are 10 critically hated video games that are actually amazing. Alien Isolation. It's not hard to see why some people hated Alien Isolation. The game is definitely not for everybody, but the cool thing about video games is they don't have to be. Unfortunately, this is a concept many gamers don't seem to grasp. If they don't like something, they'll not only trumpet their dislike for it on social media, but they'll often outright attack anyone who says that they do like it. Surprisingly, Alien Isolation is a fantastic game for people who enjoy being scared, for people who like seriously intense gameplay, and for people who live, eat, and breathe the Alien movies. It's not for everybody, but the game appeals to a whole lot of people, and for every one of them, Alien Isolation will be a real treat, just not in a peaceful or happy way. If nothing else, Alien Isolation acts as a love letter to the original Alien movie. It painstakingly recreates the look and feel of the film, as Ripley's daughter searches a space station for information about what might have happened to her mom. As you might expect, her search puts her in a vacuum-sealed environment, which also happens to have a full-sized xenomorph in it. What follows is some of the most white-knuckled stealth action gameplay you've ever experienced. The game isn't everyone's cup of tea, but it doesn't have to be. If it sounds like it might be up your alley, be sure to give it a shot. Personally, I love it. Way too scared to continue a few levels in, but I love it regardless. Hitman. The Hitman series and its bald-headed assassins have been sneaking around the video game landscape for many years now. Its stature has waxed and waned over time, but it's been big enough to have 2 Hollywood action movies based on it. When Square Enix relaunched the series in 2016 as an episodic game to be released throughout the year, gamers mostly shrugged and ignored it. It's a shame because Hitman turned out to be a fantastic game. Initially, its episodic structure puzzled fans of the series, but it actually turned out to be a great idea. Every couple of months, players would get a vast new level set in a worldwide location ranging from Paris to Bangkok to Colorado. Releasing the levels one by one encouraged players to play and replay through the missions, finding new ways to take out their targets. The game offered escalation contracts, which changed up the levels, making your targets harder to take out. It even featured limited time events like elusive targets, which rewarded players with awesome gear for checking in throughout the month. Gary Busey, the wild card, yelling, "You'll never find me, I have the power of invisibility," is one of my favorite moments in gaming. If you missed out on Hitman as it was released throughout 2016, you can buy the complete edition right now on PS4, Xbox One, and PC. While you won't be able to go back and play through the elusive targets you missed, you'll still get to play through all the levels in a single package. Not a bad deal for a critically overlooked game. Enslaved, Odyssey to the West. Do you like the movie 28 Days Later? How about Sunshine, Dread, and Ex Machina? These films have one thing in common. They were all written by a man named Alex Garland. He is a brilliant writer who pens mind-bending stories driven by relatable human beings. He also co-wrote the video game Enslaved, Odyssey to the West, and wouldn't you know it, Enslaved has one of the best stories and some of the most likable characters of any game ever made. The action isn't half bad either. Set 150 years in the future, war machine technology has advanced to the point of automation, and the apocalypse has come and gone. All that's left is the dregs of humanity, who struggle to survive in a world still very much inhabited by the bots of war, and wouldn't you know it, those bots are still designed to kill humans on sight. You play as Monkey, a lovable brute who's been enslaved by Trip, a woman who simply wants his help getting home. Cue an epic journey across a destroyed yet strangely beautiful world. Their unlikely friendship blossoms as you navigate treacherous terrain and fight off both biological and mechanical enemies. Enslaved, Odyssey to the West didn't sell or review particularly well, but that doesn't mean anything. This game is one for the ages. Mass Effect Andromeda. How do you follow up on one of the best, most intricate sci-fi trilogies ever produced in any medium? That's the question the developers of Mass Effect Andromeda faced when they started making the game. The original Mass Effect trilogy was a remarkable achievement. It established a deep well of sci-fi lore filled with alien races, complex histories, and tons of new technology. The lore is used as a backdrop for 3 action-packed role-playing games where players travel to distant corners of the Milky Way, solving problems and fighting bad guys along the way. But after closing the trilogy, the developers at BioWare Edmonton decided to work on a new IP called Anthem. To keep making games in the series, publisher Electronic Arts chose BioWare Montreal to make Andromeda. That's where I live. Man, was I excited to hear that it was being made here. Fan anticipation grew as the developers began releasing trailers which hinted at this next-generation installment. What could this new team do with a Mass Effect game that wouldn't be burdened by the constraints of having its Star Commander Shepard? It was an exciting prospect, especially since the game would take place in a whole new galaxy, opening up a wealth of possibilities. Once Mass Effect Andromeda came out, many fans and critics found it lacking. But if you come into it without sky-high expectations, you'll find a sweeping, galaxy-spanning adventure. Just leave your hype at the start screen. The Order 1886. The Order 1886 fell victim of its own hype. The game looked incredible in trailers, showing off its gothic setting, its cinematic style, and its terrifying werewolves. Werewolves, people! You get to shoot werewolves! You play as a Victorian-era version of Sir Galahad of the Round Table. You're a member of a group tasked with protecting humanity from half-breed beasts who roam the world and prey on the citizens of London. Sounds great, right? It seems like an ideal setting for a unique, gorgeous shooter. That's what everybody thought while watching the trailers leading up to the Order's release anyway. Once it actually came out and people got to play it, they learned what the Order 1886 actually was: a short, highly linear shooter. Admittedly, it looked great, but players expected there to be more of it. If you go into the game knowing what it actually is and without the baggage the overhyped early players had, you'll find a fantastic, atmospheric shooter. The environments are perfectly gloomy and the visuals are sweepingly cinematic. Reviewers complained about the lack of player input during certain parts of the game, but if you go into it expecting to be swept up in an alternate history adventure, that shouldn't bother you. What you'll find is a compelling shooter primarily concerned with its story, and there's nothing wrong with that. Mad Max. Mad Max was doomed from the start. Not because it was a bad game, not even because for some reason it was unrelated to the movie Mad Max Fury Road. Mad Max was doomed because of its release date. Mad Max came out on September 1st, 2015, which wouldn't have been a problem except for the fact that the year's most heavily anticipated game also happened to be released on the same day. We're talking about Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Metal Gear had been in the works for years, with fans getting more hyped by the day. Just like Mad Max, Metal Gear offered a vast open world and an array of abilities. The difference was, Metal Gear Solid 5 was the conclusion to one of the very best video game series ever made. It was the culmination of 3 decades worth of games which changed the industry. Alright, I'm a huge Metal Gear fan. I gotta stop talking about it and get back to the point. Going up against Metal Gear was a bad idea for the publisher of Mad Max. On launch day, the vast majority of people who might otherwise have bought Mad Max chose Metal Gear instead. Had Mad Max launched a month earlier when it would have had less competition, gamers might have given it a chance. And if they had, they would have found a fascinating, huge post-apocalyptic world. They would have found thrilling vehicular combat and brutal fights on the ground. If gamers had just given it a shot, they would have liked Mad Max just fine. The Elder Scrolls V: Skyrim VR. No game is perfect. Every game has imperfections or has cut corners which take it down a peg in the eyes of most players. When reviewers put on their PlayStation VR headsets and entered the world of Skyrim, many of them dwelled on the problems instead of letting themselves be blown away by the fact that they just entered the world of Skyrim. Does this game have issues? Absolutely. It takes time to get used to using the move controllers to do everything from navigating terrain to battling dragons bigger than houses. Yes, this game is just as buggy in VR as it is on the plethora of other platforms it's available on. Once you get used to the controls and forgive the inevitable bugs, you realize you're actually inside this endlessly deep fantasy world. You can climb mountains to the throat of the world and swim in streams in the valleys below. You can join the Thieves Guild or explore caves, cleaning out bandit camps as you go. After getting scores of bite-sized VR experiences and very few full-length games, PlayStation VR owners finally have one of the meatiest RPGs ever released to explore. It's astonishing how Bethesda took the time to bring one of the best games it ever made to VR, an unproven emerging technology. When you really think about it, it's easy to see past the issues in Skyrim VR and realize what a magnificent achievement this game truly is. No Man's Sky. What developer Hello Games accomplished in the lead up to No Man's Sky is remarkable. They built up an incredible amount of hype for a game which wasn't based on an existing license. Here was this indie game made by a team of about 12 people that promised to let players explore an infinite number of planets throughout the universe. It was a game that let you gather resources on alien planets, then hop into your spaceship, soar into space, get in space dogfights, and land on any other planet of your choosing. The possibilities seemed endless. Sean Murray, the game's director, seemed to be promising the moon during his many press interviews, including one on Late Night with Stephen Colbert. It all seemed too good to be true. As it turned out, it was. No Man's Sky was one of the biggest letdowns in video game history. It offered a universe to explore, sure, but aside from gathering resources and getting into dull combat, there just wasn't much to do. Here's the thing, No Man's Sky is actually fine. It's even got a number of updates, which make it a much better game. Despite this, many customers had already returned the game before the updates came out. If you go into No Man's Sky today without the expectation that it'll blow your mind, you'll find a relaxing space exploration game. There are worse things in the world. New Super Mario Bros. 2. You have to look long and hard at the Mario series to find a game that wasn't critically well received when it came out. Nintendo has shown an astonishing amount of consistency and quality in this franchise over the decades, so it's surprising when you see a Mario game with reviews in the 70s rather than in the high 80s or 90s. One of the worst reviewed Mario games in recent years was New Super Mario Bros. 2, a Nintendo 3DS game which came out in 2012. What's so bad about it? Reviewers at the time seemed to have grown tired of 2D Mario games. It's true, New Super Mario Bros. 2 came out after two previous games had already brought 2D Mario back to modern consoles. It's also true, it didn't introduce as many groundbreaking ideas as most other Mario games, but when you compare New Super Mario Bros. 2 to other games outside the excellent Mario franchise, it blows most of them out of the water. New Super Mario Bros. 2 is a phenomenal game in its own right. The game's big focus is on collecting coins. Other Mario games reward coin collecting, obviously, but here coins pour from the sky like raindrops. The goal, should you choose to accept it, is to rack up 1,000,000 coins as you play and replay the levels. It's great stuff and a game every 3DS owner should have. 1-2 Switch. Granted, 1-2 Switch isn't the kind of game to blow the minds of everyone who buys a Nintendo Switch. It's not a system seller. It doesn't compare to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Splatoon 2, or Super Mario Odyssey. It just isn't that kind of game. So what kind of game is 1-2 Switch? It's a mini-game collection that does two things very well. First of all, it shows off the unique aspects of the Switch's Joy-Con controllers. There's a lot of technology packed into those tiny things. Each one has an accelerometer, a gyroscope, and an intricate rumble function. The mini-games in 1-2 Switch make use of these features in creative ways. One game has you compete in Old West-style duels where the first player to draw their Joy-Con wins. Another game has you shake a Joy-Con to see if you can figure out how many imaginary ice cubes are in it. The rumble feature helps you figure it out. The other thing 1-2 Switch does well is appeal to non-gamers. Like Wii Sports did for the Wii, 1-2 Switch lets non-gamers play alongside dedicated gamers who know their right bumper from their L3 button. Anyone, regardless of familiarity with video games, can do the things 1-2 Switch asks of you. That's not something most games can boast. No one's perfect, even gamers and critics. If there's a critically hated game that you think is awesome, be sure to let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our great video content. Thanks for watching.
Here we go!